I just want to say to anyone that's watching on the internet, if I act a little strange or do something funny, earlier in the spring, I fell and broke my wrist, and on my shoulder, I had two places on my rotator cuff that were totally torn and one that was partial. And so I've had the surgery for that. I've just started the physical therapy. I cannot lift my arm above this. I can if I lay down on my bed and totally relax and use the other arm to lift it up right now, but I can't do it. So sometimes when I'm turning pages and things, it's not easy with my left hand. And I also have some things going on with my fingers and numbness, which is possible um, due to some neck issues. So anyway, if I look like I'm fumbling around, I'm trying. I don't usually. I haven't been using my Bible because it's hard to turn the pages, but I want to today. So today we're going to talk about faith without works is dead. Now, when it says dead, it means fruitless. It's just fruitless. So in James, I'm going to start in James chapter 2, verse 14. And I use the Passion, I'm using the Passion translation, so it may be a little bit difficult for you to follow along. You can just listen if you want. My dear brothers and sisters, what good is it if someone claims to have faith but demonstrates no good works to prove it? How could this kind of faith save anyone? For example, if a brother or sister in the faith is poorly clothed and hungry, and you leave them saying goodbye, I hope you stay warm and have plenty to eat, but you don't provide them with a coat or even a cup of soup, what good is your faith? So then faith that doesn't involve action is phony. You can tell that's the different translation. But someone might object and say, one person has faith and another person has works. Go ahead then and prove to me that you have faith and without works, and I will show you faith by my works as proof that I believe. You can believe all you want that there is one true God. That's wonderful. But even the demons know this and tremble with the fear before him. Yes, they're unchanged. They remain demons. O feeble sons of Adam, do you need further evidence that faith divorced from good works is phony? Wasn't our ancestor Abraham found righteous before God because of his works when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? Can't you see how his action cooperated with his faith, and by his action, faith found its full expression? So, in this instance, he gives an example, but in this example of works, that's a works of obedience, and that's part of it. So when I looked up about works, it tells you it's love, mercy, and service. What happens is if you have real belief and you're walking in the Lord, it changes your heart and you become someone that wants to give. And another place I read that said genuine religious faith naturally produces good deeds and active obedience. True real belief changes a person's heart and produces outward action. We need to have our heart changed. You don't just say the prayer and don't change. You've got to begin to change. And that's an expression of your faith. Works are acts of love, mercy, and service. But in the case of Abraham offering Isaac, it's obedience to what God told Abraham to do. Now, in James, you might think that this is kind of changes it a little bit, but it doesn't. I'm sorry, not in James, in Ephesians. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 7, throughout the coming ages, where am I? Yes, throughout the coming ages, we will be the visible display of the infinite riches of his grace and kindness, which was showered upon us in Jesus Christ. For by grace you have been saved by faith. Nothing you did could ever earn this salvation, for it was the love gift from God that brought us to Christ. So no one will ever be able to boast, for salvation is never a reward for good works or human striving. You know, that it's hand in hand, that when you have faith, you are going to do good works if you're growing as a Christian, but that's not what gets you into heaven. It's not your good works. The sad thing is, we all know people that are good people, and they're always giving, and they're working at the food pantry, and they're doing this, but they don't know the Lord. And that's the only way to get to heaven. But doing those good works is not, it's not a key to open the door. God has a plan for us. And, it says, we have become his poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us, for we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it. So, God, in his plan, he has a plan to use you to help somebody. And what happens, and I've heard many stories from many different preachers where they say God came to them and asked them to do something, and they said, well, I'm too old, or why are you coming to me? And the Lord has said, because I've tried, 14 people before you, or something like that. He's looking for the someone that will do something. And we need to be the one that says, here I am, use me. So, he has a plan for you, for every one of us. And we have to look and find and listen and find that. So I'm going to just show some examples of faith and using it, as I mentioned about obedience with Abraham. But obedience is God telling you to share with somebody. And do you do it or not? I always remember this story that one of our friends said that God kept telling them every day to go in and witness to somebody in, I don't know, like a 7-Eleven or Quick Trip or something like that they would stop and get coffee before they went to work. And they didn't do it. And the next day God would say, I want you to witness to this person, and they didn't do it. And it went on. And then one day they finally felt like they had enough courage to do it. And they drive there, and the whole place has been torn down or burned down or something. It's no longer there. And that person is gone, and they missed it. Now God will use somebody else, because he was really trying to reach that person, and he might be telling you to give a word at church. Learning to be obedient is not always easy if you're a shy person. He might ask you to pray for somebody. We've had several people during the prayer time share that God has asked them to pray ask them to ask a coworker, can I pray for you? Or a friend or something like that. So you get the unction from God, and in that moment, you're fulfilling what his destiny for you is. Another way that we do is in praying for our family and friends and for the prodigals to come back to the church. A lot of people say, yeah, I'm going to pray for this, and they might pray one time and then that's it. I'm trying to do certain prayers before I get out of bed. Now, sometimes if you're running late, you can't do that, but I try to. An example, which I may have shared, that I have a friend I went to high school with. She's been going through chemo. She's had a really rough time of it. She is a believer. And then, so she's been going through chemo over a year, and she's going to go till October. So, and almost every week she is back at the hospital having to get hydrated because the chemo makes her have so many symptoms and sickness. And then this week, her husband had hip surgery. So usually, a lot of times, I text my family in the morning, and at the same time, I would text her, but I knew that she had her phone on silence. So even though in Oklahoma it's very early in the morning, she won't see it till later. And I say, well, I was praying for you and praying for your husband, Mike, or whatever. And so she sent me a message and said, please this week don't text me early in the morning because her husband, who had hip surgery, was going to have to stay in the second bedroom. And they wanted to have their phones on. So if he needed her, and so she didn't want to hear that ding. So I have to make myself remember in the afternoon to contact her and try to, encourage her that, this will come to an end. And she's had to, I think, cancel like 3 vacations that were with her daughters and grandkids, like cruises that they planned. And, it's a rough time. So anyway, but I I take it very seriously if I say I'll pray for you, to figure out a way to remember to do it. If you have to write yourself a note and stick it in, on the mirror in your bathroom to remind yourself uh, to do it. I was telling somebody, they gave me all this medicine when I was hurt, and I'm not very good at taking anything, and I'm really not good at remembering it because I just don't like to take anything. And I take one thing a day, but I just don't like it. But the only way I could remember was to have it all sitting out on the counter. But we don't have very many people come into our house, and I don't like that. But I had to have it right there in front of me to remind me. So sometimes we have to do something to remind ourselves, hey, I want to be praying for my family. And, it's as Jennifer had mentioned, time is short, the Lord's coming, and we want all our family members, all our friends, all our coworkers, everyone. We want as many people, just like the Lord does, to be saved and go to heaven as possible. And if God can use us we ask that, someone be sent across their path or what to do. Another example of works is in our tithes and offerings. You're not going to go to hell if you don't tithe. And if someone tries to tell you that, you better change where you're listening from. But it is something that God's asked us to do, is to return 10% back to Him. And so we want to be obedience to Him in what we're doing and in giving. I've had a strange year this year because I worked part of the year, but not all of the year. And then I don't know if you know this, but if you are over 72 and a half, I think it is, unless they've changed the age again, you have to take money out of your retirement plan. But if you send it directly to a nonprofit, it does not become income for you that year. So I figured out what my tithe was going to be for the whole year and sent one lump check. But it's not in me. Now that was tithing, and I did more. I gave more, so it would be offerings too. But I can't just sit there and not give. Every time I want to give, I put, and in my checkbook, I have a checkbook. I'm still one of those, but the only checks I write are to Faith Family Church. So I was talking to one of the guys at work and said, has anyone called you about the way I write my checks out? Because my handwriting is so bad. When I was first only using my left hand, now I'm trying to use my right hand, but I can't do it very good. And he said, no one's ever called me. And because if you have a shaky signature, sometimes they call and want the broker to confirm that it's a good check. And then I had the thought, well, wait a minute. Every single check in there is to Faith Family Church. Now, if someone stole my checkbook, who's going to write a check to Faith Family Church and sign the name Claudia Ross? Why would they do that? So it makes sense. But he pulled up a copy of the check and he goes, oh, he started laughing. He goes, I see what you mean. Your writing is not what it was. But anyway, we want to be faithful in the works of giving and tithing. And that's part of, what we're doing is we're expressing our faith that God's going to take care of us. Sometimes that makes your balance go down really low. You don't give what you don't have. Don't write a hot check to the church. But that has happened. And usually it's just a mistake in addition or something. But anyway, you are showing God that, one, you're obeying him and presenting a tithe, and two, how much you love him. And it is a works, but it's not going to get you into heaven, but he does smile upon you, I'm sure. And it shows that you have faith that he is going to take care of you. There's nobody here in our church that is homeless or living in their car. I mean, there's a lot of churches that do maybe have homeless people, but we don't. You're not homeless. You may not have everything you want to eat. Maybe you can't go buy the steaks you want or the rack of lamb or something like that. But I don't see anybody wasting away in here, except for maybe one over there and one over here that are the skinny ones. That's just because they're healthy eaters. Another way of works is giving, just by giving of yourself, giving someone a ride to somewhere. There's people that need rides. I've mentioned this before, but my mother, when she was alive, was the most giving person there ever was. When she was 90, she probably shouldn't have been, but she was still picking up people in her Sunday school class to take them to church and giving them rides home. She always had casseroles and homemade cookies in her freezer. So as soon as she heard someone was sick, someone had a death in the family, whatever, she pulled out that stuff and she was ready to go. But she was always ready, and she was such a giver, and she would call people. And I've also told you my grandmother on my dad's side, my grandmother Kennan, at the Baptist church, on their envelope, she wrote down how many calls you made, how many visitations you did, what you did. And that was part of it. But they're trying to get you to do God's word and be the Christian we should be. And you don't do it just to get a check off the box, but you do it out of your heart that you love people. One more story about my mom. She had a friend that got real angry with her. It was a friend that had been a best friend her whole life and was actually in her wedding, which I think she had a wedding party of, maid or matron of honor and the best man, and that was it. And this lady was in it, and they had a falling out. And then this woman ended up in a memory facility. And my mother would still go visit her, even though she didn't know who she was. Or if she ever had a thought, it usually came out the angry thought. But my mom didn't want her to be alone, because this friend had one daughter who lives in Florida, wouldn't be there to come visit her. My mom wanted someone to visit her. That's how good she was, but that's how we all need to be, really caring about people and taking care of them, and realize that, everyone, you don't want to be grilled about a sickness you have or this or that, but it sure is nice to have someone check in and say, is there anything I can do for you? Or do you need any help? But giving someone a ride or cooking, call someone. Now, I'm not saying text. I've kind of gotten, and one day I got angry at myself because I text my children every day. And we have a group text where everyone says good morning. And one morning I thought, I think this is really getting cold and I'm not sure if anyone really wants it or whatever. And I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I got calls from several of them saying, are you okay? What's up? What's up? You know, my sister's going, no, don't stop it, because that gives her a connection with Heidi and Jennifer and everybody else. But most of the time, we need to pick up the phone again and really talk with people. Now, I talk to my sister usually once a week. I talk to my son sometimes a couple times a week. I talk to my son probably more than Heidi, and we live on the same foundation. But he talks to me while he's working, since he works from home and is drawing. And but pick up the phone and call someone. Giving money. You know, when we first got saved, it was really common for God to speak to someone and say, you know, after church, I want you to give $20 to Marie. And you don't know why. You have no idea that anything's going on. But maybe she had that morning prayed, you know, Lord, if I had an extra $20, you know, I could do this or I could do that. And God is meeting her needs through you. That was very, very common. It might be $1,000. It might be more, might be less. We were at a church service where the pastor got up, and I think pastors mentioned this, and the pastor got up and said, there's someone here that was praying for a sewing machine, and there's someone here that has a sewing machine to give. And man, these two people popped up, and one had a sewing machine to give and the other one had a sewing machine. But that's how God used to work. I think he still wants to work that way, but people don't listen. You know, it might seem embarrassing. Like, I don't know, if I went up to somebody that had, you know, good job, drives a nice car or something, say, well, God told me to give you $10. Well, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe they walk out. You know, a lot of people, my husband carries no cash on him. So he's always turning to me when you see the little kid selling lemonade or something and says, you know, do you have any cash? And I pretty much always have cash. But you never know. You give that person that money and they may be going to run an errand, and then they somewhat see someone that they should give that to. I think there was somebody recently that was telling me a story about someone that was always by a grocery store, you know, on the street every day out there with their little bucket or whatever. And they stopped one day and said, all I have is this book. And it was, you know, I don't know, Why Tongues or something, some kind of Christian book, something. And she said, but I want to give you that. You know, God will have you do something, and it might be giving money, and it might be giving money that you would put away for something. But I tell you what, he'll make it up, and you'll have what your need is. Another works is, this sounds kind of funny, but it's an obedience concerning healing. And I've told this story before, but maybe not everybody was here. When I was much younger and our children were just little, before we moved to Israel, I was going to get to go. I worked a couple of days a week at a store that had furniture and they sold Christmas stuff and everything. And I was going to get to go to Dallas Market with them and buy things from the store. And I was so excited. One, I was getting ready to, you know, have like 3 nights away from my kids. and they always had fun. They'd go out to eat, which we couldn't afford to do. And I got to buy fun things for the store. And I just was so excited. And I fell and stepped off a step and twisted my ankle really bad. Went to the emergency room, put me on crutches, and they said, no, you'd never be able to walk around, because it's like walking around the Cummings Center, you have to walk. So I was so disappointed, and I was at home taking a bath. And I think most people know that now I don't get in the bath, I take a shower, but I used to always pray in the bathtub till the water turned cold. That's where I'd pray because I would be by myself. There's nobody there, no kids, no dogs, no nothing. And I would pray in the bathtub. So I was crying. I was just like, Lord, whatever. And it was almost like an audible voice. I heard, well, if you believed you're healed, just get up and walk. If you believe you're healed, get up and walk. So I thought, okay. And I think I was home by myself. So I got up out of the bathtub, and the first step was like I do now sometimes when I'm making sure my knee will hold me. It was kind of wobbly, and I took a couple of steps, and then I took a couple more steps, and then I started walking across the house, and then I could just run. It was totally, totally healed. But I heard God say, just get up and act on it. So that was a form of obedience toward healing. Now, you can't do that on everything. My doctor, he lectured me and said, don't do this with your arm yet. Don't do this. You will rip that whole thing apart. And he even showed us these awful pictures of inside there. And this is where I tied this, and see that right there. That could happen if you do the wrong thing. So I'm not just going to all of a sudden say I'm healed and, pop my arm up, because I don't want to go back to that surgery room again. I'm going to do what they say. And they are saying, both the doctor when I was there Tuesday and when I was at the physical therapist on Tuesday and then on Thursday, say I'm moving really fast, that they're very surprised at how much mobility I have, and it's going really, really well. Now, to me, it seems like forever and forever, because I fell in April, but I had to wait for the cast to get off. But so you don't do silly things, but yet sometimes you have to get out of bed. I read one thing one time that said, when your kids are sick, people treat them like you're a king or a queen. They're on the bed or on the couch, and they get to have Coke and ice cream and all the things they normally don't get to eat. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, it's better to be sick than it is to be well. Now you don't send someone to school with a 101 fever, but there's also times where, you're not that sick. You don't have to be in bed when you're at home. Other times you need to rest and let your body heal. But I always thought that was funny. So, but healing is showing God that you're believing, your faith in that you're healed. When you do something that's hard to do. My husband goes to the grocery store with me, and he gets mad at me because I'll reach way up. I'm a little shorter these days, and I reach up to get something. And I'll go, why don't you let me do that? I said, because I'm stretching. I could have, it's good for me to reach these things. If I can't reach it, I'll ask you to get it. But if I can reach it, it's good for me, to do. So anyway, but remember that, doing any of these works is not going to get you into heaven. But works show that the love of Christ is in you and that you want to help others, that you want to obey him in all your ways. There's people out there that always say, God, use me, use me, use me. And then when God tries to tell them something, they don't want to do it, or they're too afraid to do it. And, if you miss it, then you just pick yourself up and tell the Lord, I'm sorry, I didn't obey you faster. Next time I'm going to be, more obedient and do, do what I should and just move forward. But they're an expression of your faith that God's going to provide for you. So I'm going to encourage you to, one, start every day from this point on with use me, Lord, for something. And I would encourage you to, even at the end of the day, think about your day and something that you believe that you did in obedience to God, or in faith. Write it down. I have another high school friend that during COVID, he got really, really sick. He was one of the people that had all the things that caused it to really hit you hard. And many times we thought that he might go on and be with the Lord. He is a strong believer. And so his wife posted on Facebook that he was very, very sick and in the hospital, and very, very sick. So I started, even though I didn't know him very well, I started mailing cards out, and I would send 2 cards a week. And what I found from his wife later, she said a lot of people prayed for him, but she said, he was getting prayers back because he was a real prayer warrior. She found in his things, when she was moving things around and cleaning, 14 spirals of praying for people. He would write down who he prayed for, and I don't know if he wrote down what the answer was, or if they got healed or something, but he wrote it all down, and she found 14 spirals full. So you know what? He was reaping back those prayers, and he not only did he get out, but he seems to be doing very, I see him with pictures of him with his family, and I think he goes out every Saturday and eats breakfast with one of his sons and stuff like that, and looks like he's really, really healthy. So I want to encourage you to write it down too, because you might be very, very encouraged. I heard one of the people, and I don't remember which one, on Fox one day say, they were saying something about what's the best thing he did. And he said, every day I give X amount, I don't know, 6 things. Before I start my day, I think of so many 6 things or 10 things or something that I'm grateful for. And that's how I start my day, a day of gratitude, rather than, oh no, I got to go to work and see this person and everything being negative, but starting with a day of gratitude. That's another thing you could write down. There's a lot of things that if you write them down and go back to them, they really, really encourage you. My husband's been going out to my greenhouse to read his healing scriptures, because then he can read out loud or however he wants to, and there's no one in the house. So if I see him going out there, or see him sitting out there, if he didn't tell me he went, and I just look out and see him, I know what he's doing. He's doing his healing scriptures. But come up with some things that, to be honest, routines are good, and they help you and they encourage you. So decide that you're going to be an answer, and you're going to put your faith to work, starting right now, today or tomorrow. Start your week with obeying God and go forward. And I believe we're going to have some good, give us a testimony when something happens that's, a good answer in your life, or where God used you. You're not bragging, but it's exciting when you're an answer to do God's will. It's very, very exciting when you find out that somebody had a need and you provided for it, unknowing that God just gave you. It's very exciting, and makes you feel good inside. So go have a great week. So Father, we just come to you, and we know that we have a week ahead of us, that every person here is going to be used by God, and it's going to show, their faith is going to show in works that they do. So we just thank you for all the lives that are going to be touched, all the things that are going to happen, all the healings that are going to take place, because we are trusting in you and we are obeying you. So we just give you all the praise and all the glory in our lives. Amen. So next week, birthday cake for Pastor.